This is Cult Confessions with Christy and Josie. Welcome to our podcast.
Trigger warning. May contain themes of religious trauma and sexual abuse. Disclaimer. All information in this podcast is our opinion based on our experiences. We do not purport any of this content to be inherently factual and believe that each individual has the right to draw their own conclusion.
Hi, I'm Christy.
And I'm Josie. And today we are super excited to introduce one of our guests, Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much for taking time and talking with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here in a way and sad to be here sharing, this topic with everybody, but it's good to be here. It's good to talk about it.
It is, yes. It's hard, but it's good. So I think we'll just go ahead and jump right in. If you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started with the IFB and maybe go through some of your experiences as a kid.
My mom moved down to Southern California when I was very young, 2 years old. And then my father and my mom split when I was 4. And when that happened, we were already involved in the IFB church. So my mom had started attending a small little church in San Diego and took us with her. My dad was not a big fan of it from the get-go. He was, in his words, he said he thought it was overboard. And so, and they had other issues. It wasn't just the church, but they ended up splitting and getting a divorce when I was 4 years old, and right around 4 or 5-ish. And so, but my mom kept us, me and my older sister, going continually, very faithfully. And my dad just kind of backed away into the shadows and saw us just periodically. I think, like back in the 80s and 90s, it was still, dads just had every other weekend. And so, and my mom even put big restrictions on my dad. We didn't even get the whole weekend with my dad. My dad was only allowed to pick us up for dinner on Friday nights, or every other Friday night, and then Sunday in between church services. So he got to take me for the afternoon on Sunday in between church services, and then would just take me back for the Sunday 6 o'clock service. And so that, my mom was a single parent with my sister and I for a few years. And then she met Gary, my stepdad, through the IFB. They dated for a total, or courted for a total of 6 weeks before the actual wedding.
That's quick even for IFB.
Yeah, that's really fast.
Yeah. So there was no, there was no time to really get to know this person who you're marrying. And my mom coming into the marriage with 2 girls. He had no previous kids or relationships. He was just, a Navy guy who had been recruited, like from Soul Winning. They would go and knock doors, and a bunch of this big military town in Southern California. And so Gary was one of those guys. My mom said that they got to know each other through the church for a while before they started dating. So she'll always say, like, no, I knew him before. It just, we were officially dating for those 6 weeks before the marriage.
How long does she say that she knows him? Like, how long, from her perspective, would she say that she knew him before they got married?
Well, she would say she knew of him. I don't know. I don't think I asked her like a specific date set of time, but I would say she would imply like a year or so.
Okay.
But all of that is null and void. She had no idea who he was. Purity culture is you save yourself for marriage. You save the first kiss. You save so many things for marriage. And I personally, I disagree with it on for so many different reasons. But from my perspective, looking back, there really was no time to get to know this person. Like, you are so driven to get married really quickly because, I don't know a nice way of putting this, but like, or politically correct or appropriate way of putting this, but like, as humans, our sexual desire is really strong. And so it's important to, sit with that and to, how does this, determine or play a part into my humanity as a whole person? And when you deny yourself to really get to know a person on that level before making that commitment, is a huge red flag to me, or it can be such a disaster. It can prove to be such a disaster and actually really harmful to yourself, your relationship, and then especially if you have children that you bring into that relationship, whether it be your children that you share together or children from prior relationships, and
that was disastrous for you.
It goes even a step further in this culture of not just waiting to get to know that other person on that level, but it was really stressed and taught not even to get to know yourself on that level. I feel like that was denied. It was taboo to even think about yourself in a sexual way at all. Like, you are a sexual being. You were supposed to put those things up on a shelf, not talk about them, not discuss them, not dive into what makes you unique in that whole area of your life. You're supposed to just like avoid it like the plague.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, once you do get married, it's going to be this beautiful and amazing thing that you're going to figure out. And it's going to be wonderful. Like, that's the picture they paint, is just this, you're going to have this oneness with this person, and it's going to be way more intimate and connective because you waited, because you keep this, say, it's viewed as it's very sacred, but it's actually very secretive.
But they only do that, like, they only tell women that. They only tell women that it's going to be this, like, beautiful, magical, connected, emotional thing, like that intimacy factor. That's only something we're told as women. The men in the IFB are just like, you're going to have an orgasm, congratulations, like, that's great for you. Like, that's it. Like, they don't get, like, that intimacy and that emotional connection isn't, like, a promise or a positive thing for men. Like, so it completely negates that, because if your partner isn't on that same level as you, that intimacy, that emotional connection that you crave, whether you're a man or a woman, it just doesn't really happen.
Well, and they just don't teach how that is, how you work through issues, and there's not an openness around that conversation. And even after I got married, there still wasn't an openness. Women didn't talk about really what goes on and what is, I think women talk about what's expected. Like, what's expected of you as a wife to fulfill your wifely duty. There's been plenty of books that are written about that. But it's, for me, in my experience, it was never like there were these older women that came alongside of you to help coach you and support you through figuring it all out by yourself. Like, there was no it was like you were left on your own and to just figure it out. But, like I said, it's not just the abstinence piece that can be so toxic. It's also the, like not feeling like you have a voice and can connect with these with other people, whether it be women or your pastoral stuff. Like, you can't be open about it. It's such a taboo on a personal level that it's almost looked at as like, I felt like when I would share about whether it was sexual issues or just my own intimacy preferences, like with other women and things like that, I felt shamed. I felt shamed that I wasn't supposed to be sharing that kind of information. That was just for behind closed doors. Husbands and wives just need to figure that out on their own. Really what that leads to is a disconnection, and it places all of this actual responsibility to support wives, support mothers, support women, support girls before they're even there, all on a man. To, like, especially growing up IFB as a woman, as a girl, you were not your own. You were not your own. You were under a man at all times. You were, if you made a decision that your father or your pastor or your youth pastor or your singles ministry leader didn't agree with, they had every right to come and talk to you about that, to correct that behavior. So then fast forward, you get into a relationship when you're an adult and your leader is now your husband, and no other women will talk about these issues because there's shame, and you're just supposed to keep these secrets. And that creates an environment that is just prime for abuse. And so many people get sucked into it. And my mom was one of those people. And she married Gary. Gary is also 7 years younger than my mom, which is not a huge deal, but she definitely had more life experience than he did up until that point. And he wasn't educated about children. My mom was a business owner in Southern California. After her and my dad split, she opened her own daycare in our house. So we owned a daycare. And Gary came in like a wrecking ball, like an absolute wrecking ball, which from my perspective, up until that point in my life, there had been no men that ever behaved that way. Not that I noticed in the church. Like, everybody obviously is on their best behavior most of the time at church when they're in a large crowd. It's not to say what goes on behind closed doors at the church is always above board.
Right.
Because it's not. But for the most part, when you're in the auditorium, it's a looky, you fit the part. You play by the rules. You don't stir the pot too much, right? Like, that goes for everybody. I mean, like, what goes on behind closed doors is much different than what is happening when the church doors are open. So we really had a rude awakening when the abuse started. His temper was off the rail. The abuse started immediately when they got home from their honeymoon, which they took a 2-week honeymoon, which is no big deal, but it was huge. It was huge to go from your mom is there with you all the time to your mom now not here with this new guy, which you're trying to get used to as a young kid, and then he just loses it. His temper was irate. He was majorly physically abusive. He would just blow off the handle with any little thing. There was a incident at my mom's daycare where he spanked one of the babies because they didn't eat all their lunch at the table one day, and he wanted them to finish their food before getting up, so he spanked that child and left a mark. And the parents called CPS. He was investigated, but they kind of just gave him a slap on the wrist. And they didn't I would say they investigated on the daycare level, but they didn't investigate on like asking his children.
Nobody checked to see if you were okay.
No. So, and my mom and Gary never really talked about that. Things are, when stuff would happen, like there would be this big commotion, and then the next day it was like nothing ever happened. It was really hard for me because the abuse was to a level that I knew in my heart was wrong, was damaging and toxic, and I couldn't understand why nobody else around was responding the way it should have been dealt with. That was confusing to me because I watched my mom just sit by and make excuses for him, say things like, well, if we wouldn't have been so disrespectful, he wouldn't have responded that way. Or if you would have obeyed right away, he wouldn't have ... And these punishments, these things, like for normal offenses of like, oh, I didn't put my clothes away after my mom got done folding the laundry, and I said I did. So there was one time I lied and I said, yeah, I put my clothes away. And I think I had put them on my bed or I put them on top of my dresser, but I didn't actually put them away. And I was a little girl. I was 9 years old, 10 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And he got so angry with me, and said I deserved so many spankings. I was terrified of it. I was so terrified. He dragged me into the back room, and it was the first time he spanked me. And I literally had bruises from the middle of my back down to the back of my knees.
Oh my God.
He hit me so hard, I urinated on myself. And I just remember thinking, this is not correction. This is scary. Yeah. I could lose my life. Like, I'm afraid of him. And so I remember, just a couple things had built up over that first year of marriage. Within that first year of marriage, I know I went to my pastor. I took it to the pastor of the church because there were times like he was angry that I wanted my mom to sign my homework slip, and my mom was pregnant with my brother Jonathan at the time, and he was angry that I asked her because she was feeling sick that morning. And I vividly remember him picking me up by my school uniform and throwing me up against the wall. There was a wall of like a bunch of keys. My mom had like collected keys or whatever, and they all jangled right over my head. And he screamed in my face that I was his daughter. He was my father now, and that he would sign my homework slips. And then dropped me, and I just slid to the ground. And my sister screamed at him. My sister was like, "Don't ever do that." And she ran from him. Like, he was just this giant, reactive, angry man.
He's a big guy. I've met him before. He's a big guy.
And it was very scary as a little girl to go from everything being, my mom and my dad split, but I never once heard my mom and my dad argue. They never raised their voice at each other. My dad was the most gentle and kind and soft-spoken man and really like nurturing and caring. and then to go from him and my idea of what, I would really like my mom to find another guy, and in my mind thinking like my dad, who would treat us, with that same expectation that they would treat us with respect, and have that same energy. And Gary did not have that same energy, and so it was terrifying. And I took it to the pastor of our church, and I remember just bawling my eyes out, like pleading, begging my pastor to please help us. Like, something is terribly wrong. Please help us. That he's hitting us like this. He's screaming. He's like taking pictures off the wall, wedding pictures, and just like breaking them because he's angry, and stomping on them. Like, he shut my mom's hand in a door, like almost her head, like just
oh my gosh,
big abuse. And the pastor would listen to us. At first, it was my sister and I would go in and make these appointments, because we went to the Christian school, which the pastor was the principal of the Christian school. So we'd make these appointments. When we got to school, we'd like tell our teacher, we need to go talk to pastor today. So we were able to like reach out to him, which
How old were you?
At this time, so my mom married Gary when I was 9. So this would have been between the ages of 9 and 15. 15 is when I ran away for the first time. I was suffering from really bad migraines. I was depressed. I was suicidal. It was so interesting being suicidal, because on one hand, like, I didn't want to die. I knew that there was a different way, that life could be better. But it felt like a bird cage. It felt like a cage that just kept getting smaller and smaller around you, choking you. Like, your life was being controlled in every moment. Every waking moment was about high intensity control. So it really, after my mom married Gary, it really intensified that. I believe the IFB culture intensified in our home. And instead of this religion that's supposed to be so close to getting it right? Like, they're so convinced that this is the right way. Like, they believe in the right Bible. They believe in the right, like, they have the right methods of going about being the best Christian here on earth. Like, if you're not IFB, if you're not King James only, if you're not abiding by all the rules, you don't have it right. So then, in a way, they're just like, they have this super entitled mindset. The further you get sucked in, these people, it's almost like their behavior puts them up on this pedestal. The more you comply with their rules, the more you buy into doing things the IFB way, the more status you have in the church. And instead of it being a place of protection and safety and growth and spiritual growth, I quickly learned as a little girl that this was a place that harbored really dark secrets, and turned a blind eye to abuse. It was never about my well-being as a person. It was never about my safety or other people's safety or other people's well-being. It was about numbers. It was about how well you obeyed and followed their rules.
Yeah.
And if you did that well enough, they would move you up. You would move up ranks, and not ranks like official ranks per se, but like
Yeah. It's all very
status.
covert. Like all of those, you know, the ranks and like the hierarchy, like other than the pastor and a couple assistant pastors, like it's all very covert and cliquey. Like nobody
It's
comes
very,
out right and says it.
yes, it's very cliquey. And so instead of the church, you know, dealing with my family and helping them get, you know, talk about these issues and help, you know, resolve some of these issues or set boundaries so that these things didn't continue, they, in a way, protected it. They perpetuated.
Did your mom want to leave?
That's a good question. So, I would say yes. My mom expressed a lot of emotion around Gary's abuse. Like, she didn't just sit there emotionless, but she didn't do anything about it either. She would just get very upset, very sad, almost hysterical. And then, and she would say things like, "That's it, we're leaving." I remember, she didn't say that for a very long time, for years.
Okay.
Finally, one night, he had just lost it over something little. And she was like, "Get in the car." She told my sister and I and my brothers, which they were babies at that time, Jonathan and Joshua, "Get in the car, we're going to go. We're leaving right now." And it was high stress time. He was freaking out. Like, our blood was all just pounding. It's heart-stopping moments. And I thought, okay, we're going to go. We're going to finally go. Because this is crazy. This is nuts. This is insane. And he came out to the car, and my mom rolled her window down, and we're just begging her, "Please don't roll your window down. Drive away. Just drive away." And he said something to her, and I later found out that he had said something along the lines of, if you leave, I'm just going to end my life.
Oh my goodness.
That's classic
So
abuser.
manipulative.
Yes. And so, of course, my mom did not want that. And we went back inside. I'll never forget walking back inside thinking, like, this is insane. This is so dangerous. This is so...
He was just taking advantage of, like, her love for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And
well, and
my mom...
also her, like, mental state at that point, like, is something that he could take advantage of. Because at that point, he'd been abusing her for years. And the church had been abusing her for years. Again, like, you know, we'll talk about this later, but your mom has perpetuated some of that abuse as well. But she was a victim of abuse. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge that. But, like, being in that abused state for so many years, finally getting the courage to say, okay, that's it, we're leaving, like, that's such a vulnerable place to be in. And it would be so easy for him to go back in and be like, no.
Yeah, huge. When you know that you're, you know, when you're in the IFB community, it's a culture. It's, you're in it all the way. Your whole life revolves around those church doors opening, everything, or at least ours did. Our whole life was that community. And to know, like, to put myself in my mom's shoes at that time, it wasn't just walking away from her husband, who now is manipulating her and
they're still together, right? Like,
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was probably afraid of, like, the IFB.
Yeah, because you're not just leaving this one person.
your whole culture. Yeah. You're leaving your whole community. How are you supposed to start over?
Well, because if you divorce, you're kind of, would you say you kind of get shunned?
I would say, yeah, you do get shunned. Things would not have been the same. She would not have.
There are rules in church doctrine, like their beliefs that if you're divorced, you can't be a part of ministry. And your mom has always, at least to my memory, your mom has always been very active in ministry. She counseled me for things, and she was like very respected in the church as a woman. Like, she was Sunday school teacher, she did nursery, she was active in a lot of things, and none of that would have been possible if she had gotten divorced.
She would have left him. That's true. She would say that she didn't want to set that example for her children to divorce another husband.
But you're setting that example for your children, that it's okay to be beat, that it's okay for
to stay in an abusive relationship.
Your children. Like, yeah.
So
it's not okay to stay in an abusive relationship. It doesn't matter what the Bible and church says.
God does not want you to be in a marriage that's abusive and inherently unhappy and not salvageable. Like, that's not what God wants for you. Like, honestly, using their logic against them, like, how are you supposed to do God's work and, you know, be used of God and things like that when you can't function, when you're in that state where you... I don't understand the logic of why somebody would want her to stay, or anybody to stay in a marriage that was like that just for the sake of not going through a divorce. Like, that's so stupid.
When you went to the pastor, like with your sister, what did he say to you?
Yeah.
It was just more like, it was more along the lines, I feel like he said things that made me feel better. I don't know specific things that he said. Like, I don't remember specific words he used, because I ended up throughout those years, I ended up going to the pastor and the associate pastors several times.
And this was in California?
This was in California. Several times, probably 100+ times, I would go in and just say, like, this is what happened. This, you know, I remember the first time I ran away when I was 15, I ran away to friends that they also went to Lighthouse. This family also went to Lighthouse. And I didn't really have a plan. I just knew I could not stay there any longer. I couldn't live at home any longer. And so I ran to this neighbor's house. It wasn't a neighbor. Actually, it was a couple miles away from our house. But I ran there, and I immediately called the pastor. And this was such a hard time for me. This was such a, like, it was so chaotic. It was just like when you've reached the end of your rope as a person, and you don't know what else to do but to run. This is where I was in this space mentally. And my first thought is, I need to call my pastor. Like, still at that time, I still had hope that, like, somebody was going to do something. At that point, somebody was going to help me. They were going to help. And so, Christy, when you say, like, what did they say to you? It wasn't like they were like, Lisa, you're crazy. None of this is happening to you. Like, it wasn't like in your face gaslighting. They would say things that made you feel better, that made you feel like, oh, they're going to do something. There's hope. Mm-hmm. They're going to protect me this time. And when you're taught, like, that this is your whole community, you don't go outside of that. You stay and you try to reach for help on the inside of that community. And these are people, these are leaders that are like, they're saying that they're helping the poor and feeding the hungry and protecting the needy and and giving of themselves. It's in this package that it's so godly and it's so giving and it's so loving. And then one of their own members who's a child, it's like, I always just felt like, is this on? 1, 2, 3? Is this on? Like, are you hearing me? Do you not?
Yeah.
Why is this not important enough for you to do anything? But that didn't register to me for a long time, because in my mind, these men were great. These people were.
Well, it sounds like they were just like pacifying you guys.
And it sounds very placating. Like, yes, we understand that you are upset or something like that, and I sympathize with you. I don't care enough to do anything about it and get involved in this and protect you, but yeah, that sucks.
They probably also like assumed that you're being like a little bit dramatic or something too, because you are a woman. So
and also a child.
My mom jumped on that bandwagon of she's just dramatic, and actually that evolved into her telling people that I was out and out lying. So she labeled me as a liar from a very early age. And actually, it's something that she has struggled with for a long time, not just me speaking about the abuse that happened, but even my own medical health. When I was a kid, she'd call me a hypochondriac all the time. Anytime I got sick, I was just a hypochondriac. Oh, she's a hypochondriac. Nothing's really wrong with her. she just doesn't, she just wants attention. Doesn't tell the truth, and she just wants attention. And so I actually almost died a few times because of that, because she for me. I got sick. I was I think I was 13 or 14, and I had appendicitis, but my mom didn't believe me. And so my sister had to tell her. My sister came and told her, after a few days of me just like suffering, just being in a ball on my bed, suffering, my sister went to her and said, like, hey, Mom, I think something is actually wrong, because Lisa is crying in her sleep at night. Like, she's not sleeping, she's just crying. And so my mom was like, fine, she can stay home from school tomorrow. And so I got to stay home from school that next day, and I walked out into the kitchen, and one of the daycare workers came in and saw me, and I was like white as a ghost, and told my mom, hey, I think you need to make an appointment for her, like take her in, she's really sick. And so she reluctantly made an appointment, took me in. They took blood work, and it came back that my white cells were through the roof. So they called us. They had sent us home after the blood work, when they called us and said, you need to bring her right in. We're doing exploratory surgery. Her white cell count is through the roof, and we think it's probably appendicitis. And but when they said that, they weren't sure, because my pain had moved up my back in a weird. It wasn't just in the typical spots of where appendicitis pain markers should be. It was like all over in my back and stomach. And so I remember to this day, I'm being prepped for surgery, and my mom comes over and grabs my hand and says, if you're lying, this is going to be really embarrassing for you. You should just tell them nothing's wrong before they go in and find out nothing's wrong. And I was like, my stomach really hurts. Something is wrong.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
They took me back, and what's supposed to be a routine surgery, 45-minute surgery, appendectomy, my appendix had, it hadn't totally burst, but it ruptured. And it had been ruptured for so many days, I had gangrene that set.
Oh my God.
In the hospital.
Did she ever apologize? Did she ever like admit that you were actually sick or feel
what
any
did
sort
she
of remorse
say
about
like
that?
the next time she saw you?
So the surgery was supposed to be 45 minutes, and after like an hour, my mom says she went up to the nurse's station and was like, hey, can you just check on my daughter went back into surgery? And this was like emergency surgery. This was in the middle of the night because it was the last surgery of the night for this guy because my blood count was so crazy. Anyways, so after like an hour and a half, she went back up and they said, they'll let you know. It took 2.5 hours. And she said when the surgeon came out, he looked exhausted. And he said that was one of the worst cases I've ever been involved in. And she's got a long road to recover ahead of her. There was gangrene. I needed to be on antibiotics for a long time. I even had to go to school with an IV port, and my mom had to come and give me antibiotics at school for a couple weeks after that. Anyways,
that's crazy.
She tells the story like she's shocked every time, but like that's so telling. You literally didn't believe me. You don't believe me. And that mindset has continued into my adulthood and my relationship with my mom. It's continued that way. I would have been able to follow more of the rules and buy into it more easily had I not been exposed to such abuse, and knowing in my heart like this abuse is over the top. She wanted everybody else to believe that we were this perfect family on the outside, that our image was more important than what was actually happening. And when you have that image, when you attain that image, you get access to more people. And my mom wanted access to helping more people, more girls.
She got it.
And that was really hard for me to watch too. My mom is this woman that everybody wants their daughters to be around.
Yeah.
Only she can't stand to be around her own daughter. She doesn't even like her own daughter. And then she's put in this position where she's mentoring other daughters and moms too. She counseled lots of women, not just teenage girls, but it was one of her missions. Her passion was to help teenage girls that,
that's crazy.
Teach them how to be a good woman. In San Diego, she had a program with the bus kids. So she started a program called the Afternoon Girls, the afternoon program. And it was for teen girls that rode the bus to church on Sunday morning. And then they could have the option to stay for the in-between service time. And during that time, they would feed the kids. And then they would teach them skills. They would have like another little like Bible lesson intertwined in like a sewing class or arts and crafts.
They did that at
class.
Faith too. They did that at Faith. I think that she also, it wasn't just her, it was also like Linda Tucker that implemented that at Faith. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like this cotillion kind of vibe, and like they would learn how to knit and crochet and sew and quilt and all of those like good woman skills. They did that at Faith too. That's crazy.
Yeah. So my mom ran that program in Southern California. And through that my mom would open our doors to our home. So we had several of the girls even live with us, which she did the same thing in Spokane, Josie, with at Faith, where she is so sure her image is so good and nail tight that she's gonna welcome other less fortunate girls into the home so that she can teach them. And
I had an open invitation because I was a troubled teen, and she had counseled me a lot, and her and Gary lived very close to us. I mean, they were maybe 10 minutes away out in the valley. And I had an open invitation. She told me to come over whenever. Just give her a call and make sure she's there, and I can come over whenever. And there were other girls that would go too. I remember distinctly one time being at her house, and Two girls that were my age, like, your mom was just laying on the couch and they were singing to her. It was very weird. But she was, like, enthralled and, like, had her eyes closed and very, like, peaceful because these two girls were just singing to her. It was the weirdest thing.
What the heck?
It was very strange.
My mom's relationship.
It was Come Thou Fount. It was Come Thou Fount. I remember the song.
It's so weird. It's so tacky. And really all I wanted was my mom to want to spend time and provide a safe place that I could go to her anytime. And all these girls got to bring their problems to my mom, and my mom would, like, listen, and I would say not judge them, but she did. She did.
Oh, she super did.
The more you got close to my mom, the more she would tell you how to behave, how to be.
Yeah.
And you were expected to be that way. Otherwise, my mom lost interest in you.
I remember in our sessions, I mean, it started because there was an instance where, so after the abuse, after everything with Daniel was over, and he was out of the church for that year, I had counseling with her quite a few times, and she would tell me that, you know, that was where I got a lot of that, like, stumbling block kind of narrative where I need to make sure that I'm wearing the appropriate clothes. She would do outfit checks for me, and I would go to her on random Sundays and be like, what do you think about what I'm wearing? Is it a problem or not? Like, it was that kind of thing. And there was also an instance, like, after the abuse where somebody, and I don't think it was abusive, it was, I mean, consensual. He was very close to my age. He was only a couple years older than me. He touched my leg at my house and held my hand. And it wasn't unwanted. It wasn't something that was bad. I had a crush on him, and he was a couple years older than me. It was completely innocent. And it was fine, but I had felt like, oh, okay, this is a problem because I viewed it in the same way as what happened with Daniel, even though it wasn't. And we were instructed, me and Rudy, that's the person who did it, Rudy Reck, we were instructed to go to Christy, your mom, for counseling. And she sat us down, and I told my side of the story, and Rudy just sat there and said it never happened. And she said, well, she looked at me and said, I think that you just like him and you want this to be true, so you made it up. So she told me I made it up. And I did not make it up. For the record, I did not make it up. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that she would say. And we would talk all the time about how I needed to be quieter and I needed to be less loud and less opinionated. And I just needed to be meek. That was one of her favorite words in our sessions, was meekness and kindness and respect and submission and those kinds of things. Like, it was awful. It was awful. But at the time, it seemed like good counseling. At the time, that was what I was supposed to do as a good Christian woman. She was absolutely right in that time, in that space that I was in.
Yeah, I think she has gotten really good at weaponizing the Bible.
Yes.
And then making, she spends a lot of time putting on this image that she is safe, and even the church recommending you guys to go and talk to her.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
like are endorsing what my mom has to say.
Yep.
Subject. And then you spill the beans, per se, or you say what has happened, and she has this ability to take the responsibility off of where it should come from and put it solely on the girl. It makes me very sad that this has happened to so many girls who were in vulnerable and dangerous situations. And instead of being actually protected from this by your safe community, you're gaslit and you're abused even further, and you're put even further into this box. So it reiterates to you, the survivor, that you're crazy. You're actually got it wrong. And you got it wrong, and you need to get right because you got it wrong. So now you've taken responsibility, and you've taken the focus off of what happened and putting it onto something that is completely outside of the box, and you're putting a spiritual spin on it. So you're adding this layer of spiritual abuse to an already abusive situation. It's still really difficult to untangle yourself from that type of coercive behavior and spiritual manipulation from your maternal figure. And then to watch that maternal figure go and do those same behaviors to other people is a really heavy.
That must have been so lonely. That must have been so lonely.
Yeah, it was very lonely.
That's awful.
You know, when people start this campaign about you and you being a child, that you're wrong, that you're a liar, that you know, and it's happened to so many of us, not just me, but it's very lonely.
And well, you're there to add value to somebody else. Like, you have no value in and of yourself. Like, you as a person, it's not recognized that you have value. You're adding value to your mom and to your family by dressing up pretty on Sunday and posing for family pictures and reading your Bible and, you know, those kinds of things. Like, that's the value you have as a child in the IFB.
I think as a woman, as a child, as a wife, a mother in that community, you're there to add value to the church, their reputation. And when you step outside of their rules and their boundaries, then you're quickly excommunicated. And maybe not like right away, like they don't kick you out, but it's obvious. It becomes obvious. People snub you. You are treated differently. You're treated not as important. And people that want to be treated like they're important will do anything and go to any length to get that feeling, have that feeling. And my mom has always suffered with depression. I've seen what happens when nobody's there, when there are no girls there, when there are there's nobody to counsel, when church isn't open, what my mom is, what she struggles with behind closed doors is a lot of darkness, a lot of sadness, a lot of frustration, a lot of wounds that are not healed, because to even begin to sit with those wounds, you have to be aware of reality. And when that reality contradicts the reality that you've painted outside for everybody else to see, if you lived in the truth of what your situation was really like, people would know that you're actually lying and you're not telling the truth and you're the one painting a facade that isn't there. It's not real. I always wished or hoped that she would want a relationship with me enough that she would start changing some of those behaviors.
That she would choose you because she hasn't historically, it sounds like.
Do you guys speak at all anymore?
So I would say we are low contact. At this time, we're no contact. I haven't spoken to her since a few weeks after Thanksgiving of this past year. My mom won't sit with truth. And I have some serious questions to ask my mom. There are things, not just that she counseled some people that in hurtful ways or gaslit them. Like that's a big deal, and those are big deals. But my mom has hid predatory behavior. She's protected people that are dangerous, very extremely dangerous, and I have questions for her that she does not want or like to answer. And so she makes it very clear that it's uncomfortable to talk to me. And in our last conversation, I brought up some of these. I brought up Josie, one of your instances I brought up to her. And she acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. And
didn't you say Josie who?
Josie who? Well,
that's crazy to me. That's so crazy to me.
Yeah. And I called her out on it. I said, "What do you mean, Josie who?" And just sat with it. Like there was a pause. And when my mom gets confronted with specific instances that are abusive and I'm not okay with, and I want to know why she responded the way she did and behaved the way she did, she gets overwhelmed. And we sat there in that moment of silence, and I had said, "What do you mean, Josie who?" And there were a couple breaths taken, and she said, "I can't speak to you right now." And she hung up the phone. And that's the last time I've spoken to my mom. So we go through these ups and downs where sometimes she's more receptive to sit with, like, "Hey, this is something, I'm calling you out on this because it hurt somebody. It hurt me. It hurt somebody I know. It hurt, whoever. And I want to talk about it." She doesn't ever respond well. She doesn't ever sit through those conversations and talk about it. And that's been a pattern of behavior going back all the way to my childhood, where she would literally walk out of counseling session because I was bringing up Gary's abuse and how he was uncontrollable. His behavior was uncontrollable. And instead of my mom viewing herself as a victim and also like, yeah, we need help with these issues, she gets defensive and triggered and overwhelmed. And so she just literally will walk out and takes it personally, which some of these issues she should be taking it personally. You're counseling these children, her behavior affected me and my sister and my brothers immensely. Like, she has skin in the game. She needs to take some responsibility.
Yeah, it seems like she's just trying to like avoid any accountability. I feel like it's very much like, I don't know, that generation of how they react. Like they're just very reactive and like feel like I'm doing my best, and if my best isn't good enough, then
you're out.
Whatever. Sorry,
Yes.
it's my best. And it's like, no, you still, it doesn't matter. Like, and I think that's the difference between them and us. It's like we're in the generation of taking accountability for our actions as parents. So like our kids don't owe us anything. Our kids don't owe us anything.
Yeah.
Like they didn't choose to come into this world. We brought them into the world. We take care of them. We give them a safe environment, a safe home. We owe them everything.
Yes.
And we owe them a sorry. Like we owe them an explanation for things that we do. We owe them like
communication and vulnerability that, yes, may be able to show like, hey, I'm triggered about this right now, but I'm going to cope and with my triggers, and then I'm going to get back to you because my
like just take a minute and we can like talk through this.
Acknowledge myself and what's happening on the inside, but then to get back to you and to reconnect, to build that bridge. As a parent, it is your job to be the one that is constantly seeking to mend that relationship, especially when your children are younger. And it's your responsibility. And to not do that, to not have that part of your life where you know, what message that sends across to those children of, I'm really not a safe person to talk to.
Yeah.
Gary took a job working overseas. He had been unemployed for a while and got this job and moved overseas. And so my mom and the boys moved up to Spokane, bought a farmhouse, and started going faith. And then I moved up with my aunt and uncles a year later. But I never moved back in with my mom.
Did you start going to faith then?
So I did start going to faith. My aunt and uncle started going to faith. At that time, I had already started the process of like deconstructing my faith, but it has taken a long time, lots and lots of baby steps to actually get to the point where I wasn't attending a independent fundamental Baptist church. I didn't quit going to faith till after Brooke was born, so my youngest daughter, until after she was born in 2011. So we went off and on when the kids were little, but I started going to faith. When I moved up, my aunt and uncle started going to faith because that's just what you did. You went to where the next IFB church, and so a much smaller church than our church in San Diego. And so it was easy for my mom to move up the ranks in that church because it was much smaller. So my family, I like to think of it as they gained like celebrity status at the church very quickly. They
did.
Like. Yeah.
We moved in 2006, so that would have been like 2.5, 3 years after you guys moved. And when we came in, they had already attained that like very high respect of status. Yeah. Well, I mean, like your mom had.
Can you tell us a little bit? You were forced to apologize in front of the church, right?
Yes. So.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I started going to the church when I was about 19. My mom started going to the church immediately when she moved up. So 2003. In 2003, she started telling me about this guy that would come out to her farmhouse and help her get, like do maintenance stuff because Gary wasn't there. There wasn't a man there. So she ended up telling me about this guy that she really wanted me to meet. And so, yeah, that's a long story, but that's who I ended up getting married to. But just prior to us getting married, I found out I was pregnant. And, of course, in the church, that's a huge no-no. We touched a little bit on the purity culture. And so, but at that time, when I got pregnant, I was 22. I was 22 years old. And I had
crazy.
I'd been seeing this guy for a couple years. My mom introduced us to each other. And I found out in December of 2006 that I was expecting my son. And I remember telling my mom, she at the time was living overseas for like a year or 6 months. She went over with my brother to live with Gary. And so they were overseas in Japan, and I called her and I said, are you sitting down? I knew she wasn't going to be excited about information. But her first response to me was, I'm sorry. I said, I'm pregnant. And she said, I'm sorry.
Whoa.
And so I immediately knew, this is not going to go over very well, but I have to tell everybody. Because at that time, I wasn't involved in a lot of ministry, but I was in ministry. that phone call with my mom was, like, she was sorry for me. She cried. And then she asked if I had told Pastor Boyle. And so I knew I needed to go to the church and tell them that I was expecting.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I did. I told the pastor. And when I told the pastor that I was pregnant, he informed me that I needed to apologize to the church. I needed to step down from my ministries and apologize for the example I'm setting. He explained to me that men don't have to do this because they don't physically show signs of pregnancy. And
are you serious?
Because I was going to physically be looking pregnant, that other people would know that I was not married. I had more responsibility.
Yeah, you can't tell that the man isn't a virgin anymore.
Yeah, no. So I need to apologize because people are going to ask questions and because I set a bad example.
One thing that bothers me so much is the fact that people in like all of the Christian realm are so like pro birth and pro whatever, like a baby, a life. And then it's like your mom is literally sobbing on the phone about you having a life like God tells you to have.
Yeah.
And you're 22 years old.
Yeah.
You're out of the house, you're an adult.
I have a job, I pay my taxes.
Then you have to tell this old man at the church this, confess to him essentially.
Yeah.
And then confess to the church as a grown-ass adult.
Yeah.
That you had consensual sex with someone.
Yeah. I needed to apologize for being pregnant. And I had a big issue with that, actually. I was not comfortable with apologizing for my son. I'm not going to start.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. Like, you're telling me that you love
baby.
Yeah, you're telling me that you don't want anyone else to like have an abortion or get rid of their baby or whatever the fuck. But then you're making me say sorry for the life that I have within me that is from God.
Yeah.
It's God's will. It's literally God's will for me to have this child according to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you
have to be sorry about it.
When you conceive a child, it's technically God's will, right? Like
according
that's kind
to
of the
logic,
vibe.
Yeah.
Yes. But then I have to say sorry, even though this is God's plan. It makes no sense at all.
It doesn't make any sense.
None.
Yeah. So I was really uncomfortable with apologizing for the fact that
you had consensual sex.
Sexually active. So and I made a point to not apologize for being pregnant. I didn't apologize for being pregnant. I simply apologized for setting a bad example is what I said. Because I would not apologize that I was pregnant with my son who I was so excited to be a mother.
Oh, yeah.
Like what I always wanted to do in life. Like I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to connect with my children
in a way that you never had that.
Never connected with me. Like I could not wait to get it right. I just remember being so scared and so nervous and so like under so much stress. Now looking back and thinking back about it, like I was under so much stress, which is not good for you.
No, it's
not.
Again, it goes back to you guys say you value life so much, yet you're putting me and my baby
at risk
through extreme amounts of stress, which is just risk. Well, and I felt like they weren't allowed to be joyful about it until you got married. So then, especially when you announce that you're pregnant, for me, it felt like
the assumption is you have to get married right away.
Have to get married. You have to get married if you want your family and you to be to still be on the radar. Like, I knew the expectation of my family was that we get married, because otherwise my family would have lost their positioning. It would have so bad.
Or you guys probably would have had to leave the church, I would assume.
Yes.
Too.
Which my husband was okay with us not going to that church. My husband did not like the church at all.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for me. It was still, I was still connected to the idea of this is the way in which to connect to my family. Like, I wanted that so badly. I want you guys to want me, but I don't want to. I'm no longer going to join you because I disagree with it, and because it's so toxic, so hurtful, and dangerous. I actually, the further away from it I get, the more I see how absolutely dangerous this cult is. It's not just fun and games. It's not just, you have a little bit of emotional abuse or verbal abuse, or you had a couple bad experiences. This is dangerous. This ruins people's lives. Yeah. And it needs to be talked about. People need to be aware that not all dangerous things look dangerous. Yeah. Sometimes they come in what looks to be a safe package, and those are, I think sometimes those are the most dangerous people. Yeah, I stopped going to an IFB church in 2011. Okay. My husband there were just some things in the church that weren't okay. There were a lot of things in the church that just weren't okay, but eventually my husband say, like, no, we're not going back there anymore. It's not safe. And so I agreed to that. But even then, like, the abuse that is done, the toll it takes on you mentally, that's another part in the belief system, is that you don't go and seek help from mental health professionals. Yeah. Keep it all on the inside. You have inside counselors. My mom was one of those inside counselors that had no training, absolutely no training, is in abusive relationships herself, and then being elevated to these titles of counseling people through life issues.
Yeah, we're basically like advised to counsel within the church, so it's called like the counseling rather than like going to therapy.
Yeah.
And they talk down on therapy. Outside secular therapy is the devil. It's not okay. They'll taint you. So you're encouraged. I was encouraged. My mom was heavily against outside therapy and medication. Any medication you need to take for your mental health was not okay.
Well, I mean, because their logic is like, you should be able to pray it away, and like, God should be able to heal you and help you through it.
I have a sermon note somewhere, and we'll do a big episode on this later on, like going through old sermon notes, but I have one where it says, the moment you start to worry, you're an atheist. And if that doesn't tell you how they look at anxiety.
It just makes
I was an atheist when I was born.
And I mean, that's in a notebook I have, like, underlined, exclamation point. Like,
I've had anxiety my entire life
as a 17-year-old. Like, I felt so convicted because I was just like, oh, I don't actually have anxiety. I'm just, I need to pray more and be more in my Bible.
There's no way to be mentally well if you're ticking all of those boxes, because what you're essentially doing is denying yourself of all of yourself. And you're asking them to fill in this space with this imaginary, this is what God wants, whatever these rules are, and you're just like a robot. You're a robot.
And like, it's literal, like, it's just like a bunch of fluff words. I feel like a lot of like the phrases that they use and stuff, they don't make any sense. They have literally no meaning, and it's just something to make you feel good and something that you're supposed to believe. And we
it's
do
also,
deny
they use
ourselves
a lot of like
ourselves.
Big words. Like they use a lot of like, you know, the heretofores and the whatsoevers and therefores and that kind of language. It makes, I feel like it makes them sound smarter than they are. Like it makes them more believable to the congregation if they sound like they're talking from the Bible, like if they sound like they're writing the Bible or something like that. Like it just makes it more somehow spiritually convicting. But yeah, it's a little crazy.
It's whatever fits their narrative.
Yeah.
For the message that they're trying to preach, they're trying to convey to their congregation or their audience, whether it be one person or an auditorium full of people, whatever their message is, they're going to find some way to back it up with the Bible says so. And by throwing in big words, fancy words, cute little sayings, whatever they have to do, it's like theater. It's watching like theater happen. Only you're taking it to heart to shape and mold your soul, your mind, your brain, your actions, your everything. And I think people are easily buying into these ideas. I know, at least, and maybe not all people, right? Hopefully not all people would be susceptible to this type of abuse, but the people that were around that I noticed, it seemed like we had this puppy dog mentality of this. You think of just this like young dog who is eager to learn. And like I think of like a golden retriever just being like so excited, you hanging on every word you say, wanting to please you in every way so that you can be closer to God and have this, you know, like enlightenment, this spirituality, this relationship with Christ, God Almighty of the universe, like, and that what you do will matter and determine whether you get to go to heaven or hell. Like those are huge motivators to get like people's attention to, hey, you should change your behavior. Only how many of those golden retrievers are actually listening to the words and meaning, like dissecting it? How many of them are able to be critical thinkers in a healthy way, to take what is being said as, oh, I agree with that, or oh, I disagree with that? I think the environment of the IFB is that you had to all agree.
There's no asking questions.
No. And especially, you know, when you're discussing the Bible, because if you have something wrong, it's with what the Bible says. The problem is with inside of you. It's not with what it has to say. So you're taught very quickly, if you have questions, if you have concerns, you're wrong. You're not right. You need to change your mindset to fit this mold. And the people that are delivering this message are really powerful. They're really influential and powerful. What they say affects so many different people. And if we as people don't have any platform to question these pastors or these people in authority, these even women, if we're the ones that are wrong. When you constantly are believing you're wrong, and they're right, it messes with you mentally.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's taught us all to like not trust our own instincts and not trust our own like just inner thoughts, inner like feelings, anything. Like, we can't trust ourselves is what we were taught. You can't trust yourself. And we're also taught to worship these pastors and these elders, you know, within the church, like the people that are in charge. We're taught to worship them, which is crazy because in the Bible, you know, like, it's like we're not supposed to have idols before God, except the pastor becomes an idol. We literally
we have them sign our Bible.
Yes. We literally wait, like, after church, we would wait in a line to get our Bibles signed by these men. And it's a patriarchal, like, society basically already, but like within the church it's even worse because only men can be pastors within the IFB. And then we're taught to worship these men. They're put in this powerful position, and obviously abuse is going to happen because we worship them like golden retrievers. And then when they turn around and try to abuse us, we have no voice and we have no way of anyone believing us. And if we do say anything, we get gaslit, like Josie was gaslit. We get told that we're liars. We get told that we're being dramatic, and nobody believes us. Yep. That's how the system is within the IFB. It's an abusive system. It's something that we have all, like, been through. We all feel it. And people that are still in it can't see it. They just don't see it. You don't see it until you're out of it. No, and then it's too late a lot of the times.
And if they do see it, they label it as we're the ones with the problem. Like, I think that there is acknowledging that things aren't right. Like, I have family members that know what they're doing is not okay. It's not okay. It's not right, but it's a duty. It's like there's honor in the duty of staying and eating it and that and keeping that hope alive that one day it will change. One day it will get better. God will
even though they're just doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Basically, we were talking about this with Amelia yesterday. But basically that because there is an afterlife within the IFB, if you believe in God or whatever, in heaven, we don't have to change things as drastically as we should, right? Because one day God will make it right. So like for justice or whatever, it's okay. Like, it's okay if this person's being bad and sinful. It's okay. Because you know what? I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to put myself in an uncomfortable situation to help people. Instead, I'm going to trust that God is going to take care of this. And God will show them in the end, like, their judgment or whatever.
It's almost like glamorizing the fact that you're not paying attention to abuse that's happening right in front of you. You're glamorizing that is not okay, all while saying, like, all while putting this in the pretty spiritual package of, like, we're just gonna let God handle this one. Like, God's the ultimate judge. It's not my place to judge. Then you're taking on that role. It's like they use whatever their agenda is. They're going to find scripture or some way to back up not doing something or doing something.
Well, and they even acknowledge that. Like, people that I've talked to that are still IFB acknowledge, like, if I come with a scripture that that I am interpreting a certain way that's against what they believe, they're just like, oh, well, scripture can just be manipulated to mean whatever you want. What it actually means, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, okay,
you just said that.
So right back at ya. Like, scripture can be manipulated to mean whatever you want.
Okay, so if we brought up a scripture right now and we all read it, we would all have a different version. We would all have a different understanding of it based on, like, our lives or whatever, like, our experiences. we would all have something different to bring out of it. And that's kind of what happens with pastors, right? They read the Bible, God gives them whatever, a message, and they share it. And we have no way of proving that God actually said that. There's no way to prove that. So it's really all just made up.
God is sitting there and just internalizing these things. And especially as a young child, I thought of them as like, these people know. They know, they have the answer. They're like,
you're taught that they're not, that they're inerrant, like that they don't make mistakes and that they don't say the wrong thing, like that you're taught that they're basically perfect, especially in their theology, like that the pastor is perfect in their theology, and that questioning him is just ridiculous because he has all the answers. He's your spiritual mentor. He will have
he's
all
the
the
one
answers.
He's the one who speaks to God, and he's the one. It's weird because it's like
studied the scriptures and been to college and done all the things and has
been
experienced
ordained
counseling.
Well, but it's weird though, because it's like with Catholicism, we have to go to the Pope because only God speaks to the Pope, right?
Right.
And like we have to go to him for forgiveness and things like that. We can't like we don't have a direct line to God. Right. Whereas with IFB, we technically do. And
we're told we can
pray.
Do.
Yeah, we're told that we can pray to God directly and have communication with him directly, read the Bible directly.
But when it comes to actual like questions about the Bible, actual like different interpretations of theology, when it comes to the hard things, that's not appropriate. If you come to the pastor and you say, my conversation, my prayer with God, me reading the Bible has led me to this conclusion, which is different than yours, it's invalid. It's wrong. You aren't allowed to do that.
You get shunned.
So they
they
tell you that you have this direct line to God, and that is what makes them so different than the Catholic Church and other churches that, you know, men interpreting scripture, that's not the way God intended it to be, and they do the exact same thing.
They do the exact same thing.
Covert.
It's just packaged differently.
Yeah,
it's packaged differently. It's the same thing as the Catholic Church, and then they say the Catholic Church, they're full of pedophiles, blah, 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 blah. And it's just the Catholic Church. No, it's the same fucking thing. It's just packaged differently. And we worship these pastors as if they're gods. And it's not okay. And that power dynamic it's toxic, it's dangerous, and it causes abusive situations.
It's dangerous because it's not only abusive within that community, but when your brain is programmed that way, and you start having relationships with other people, like growing up working or in any way, and you adopt that mindset, especially as a woman, for me, I feel like it set me up for so many failed relationships where I didn't know how to question that person, especially if it was a man power dynamic with bosses or in any type of relationship, but being able to speak up and say, no, I disagree with this, or any opposition at all, I felt like I was ingrained that I had to say yes to everything. And when, especially within the church, right? But then, and you were told not to do that in the world, and say yes to everything. Only the good stuff do you have to follow the rules with. But psychologically, when you get into, especially a marriage, when you get married and you have an issue with what your partner is saying, or you have a disagreement, and you've been raised that way to not question, to just be passive, to just take his word for it, or and then you perpetuate that and have more children and teach them how they're not to question dad, or
it's because it's the umbrella theory, right? Where it's like God, husband,
God, the pastor,
wife,
husband,
God,
wife,
pastor,
kids.
husband, wife. Yeah. But thankfully, like Nathan and I have always had like a great communication system. We never worked that way. But I can imagine that there are people that get into relationships, that get into marriages post, like, well, or during their IFB experience, that are fearful of bringing things up with their husband, and no, and like
I have
view it as like him being God's chosen person to lead them, right?
And I definitely have been, like, and that's not because my husband is a bad person or a bad man or thinks like that. It's because I was raised to think like that. Yeah. So if we got into a disagreement, I fold. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'll do better.
That's crazy because, like,
I don't do that anymore. I'm very stubborn now. But
we grew up the same way, and like we have different perspectives, I guess. But I think it's honestly just because I have a Hispanic mother. I have a strong Hispanic mother. Yeah. And so within my home, there wasn't like, she wasn't not in charge, if that, like,
yeah,
she had a voice always.
Different, yes.
Yeah, she always had a voice. And so when I got in a relationship and when I got married and stuff, I would always push back because I saw my mom, like, I saw the perspective of like my experiences. And yeah, I unfortunately am an outspoken person, and the church didn't like that. And as you can tell, Josie is also another example of that. They don't like it when you're a woman that is outspoken, that questions
loud
things. Yes. And the majority of those women aren't in the IFB anymore, I'm sure.
So speaking of not being in the IFB, Lisa, where are you at? Like,
where are you now?
Religiously?
So, yeah, that's just been a long journey. Like I said before, you know, we went to a Southern Baptist church. That Southern Baptist church ended up splitting, and then I went to a non-denominational church. Ooh.
The horror.
Getting wild.
It's so bad. No. We started going there. We went to that church for a few years, and, you know, life just kind of happened. We, at the time, my oldest son almost died. We went through a really hard time when that happened. And then my husband and I were going through some marital issues that I thought needed the attention of the church. I needed the support of the church again. And I knew what my experiences in the past have been when going forward with, you know, needing help and support. But it was a non-denominational church. It was more, you know, it seemed more relaxed and more open and connective. And I was met with a terrible response from that pastor, who basically said that if I separated from my husband, I might as well just basically kiss my kids goodbye, because they would not turn out good. There would be lots of problems. He specifically said that my son would OD on drugs.
Oh my God.
So if you have like divorced parents, you're instantly
you're just screwed, I guess.
Bad. Yeah. Damn.
It was not okay. And it all based off of like my husband and I are going through a hard time. Like, we almost lost my son. We are struggling with these other areas. Like, I just longed for that, the ability to be vulnerable to other people who could help. Mm-hmm. Like going to the emergency room. If I broke my leg, like, I'm going there because I need help. I need you to help me. And instead, I'm being met with the, well, next time you break your leg, we'll help you. And if you do something about this broken leg, like if you do something drastic, like try to take care of yourself, then your son's going to pay the consequence. And for me, when that message was given to me again, it was really a light bulb moment for me, where it just, in my experience, my place of worship and my place of safety and sanctuary was not very safe and was not very supportive. And I needed support. And if I wasn't going to find that support there, then I needed to pull it from inside of me or find it from somewhere else. And to, like, in that, when that happened, it was very much so like that adage that they say, like, doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Yeah.
It's insane. And so for me,
you
felt like
you basically had like the same experience, like within different churches and, like, I guess, religions.
Yeah. Yes. And I was no longer going to be a part of that. Like, I gave so much of my time and my effort and my energy into church. Like, no matter what church I was in, I was always like serving in the ministries and like doing everything I could to give back to the community and be involved. And like, I wanted that connection. I wanted connection with good people that cared about me, that cared about my kids, that also cared about their spirituality, their growth in that area. And I still feel connected to like-minded people like that. For me personally, it's not in the church anymore. I don't feel like that is a place in which my spirituality can grow any longer. Right. So I like to kind of say I've outgrown church.
Yeah.
I know what that implies to the people that
yep.
See, how they will pity me
and pray for you.
And no, but I totally understand. I feel the same way. I feel like I heard every sermon possible, and I've read the Bible, heard the Bible so many times, and it just wasn't productive anymore, and it wasn't a good space for me to be in anymore.
And I'm right there with you. Like, I respect my relationship with God enough to not put it in jeopardy, to not put it in a place where it's going to be harmed. Like, that's it, and that's not a safe space for me to continue to grow in my spirituality or my relationship with God, or however you want to grow spiritually. It's not a place to be able to do that in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. So would you say you're still Christian then? Or would you say you're just spiritual?
I would say that I am drawn being a spiritual person. I want to be connected to God, the universe, the creator.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we're basing these decisions off of the information that we have, but the information that we have is incomplete. And so then to like label myself with these people, with many dangerous, predatory people that call themselves this, no, I don't want to be labeled with you.
Yeah.
I am human. Mm-hmm. I am Lisa. I am a woman. I don't identify as a Christian. But I'm not against being a spiritual person. Like I'm not like, nope, I'm nothing. I'm still deeply connected to my spiritual growth. It's just in the label of.
I have so much respect for that.
Christian or
I
just want to be human and connected to my creator. And I
human
don't know
is a good label.
what all of that is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to tell those that are in it currently? Like any advice you would give to people kind of going through anything that you've gone through?
I would say listen to your still small voice. Trust your gut. Start learning to believe yourself. Start there. Start small. And when it doesn't add up and it doesn't sit right, take note and adjust. Adjust however small that may be. Because leaving the IFB community is not easy. Leaving, it's not easy. It starts a long time before you actually walk out the doors and never come back. It starts way before then. It starts in the quiet. It starts in your room. It starts in private. And I would encourage people to start listening to themselves, their intuition, their conscience, their gut, in private. Listen to yourself. And if it doesn't add up, change. Make small changes, because small changes one day will result in a big change. And it's not too late to get out. It's not too late to start thinking for yourself. And strive to live a balanced life where, yes, church and your spirituality is a part of you, a big part of you. But when it consumes all of you, when it asks you to do dangerous things or to turn a blind eye to dangerous things that are happening around you, to you and others, especially children, don't.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah.
Speak up. Say something. Keep speaking up. Keep saying something. And make small changes that will eventually turn into big ones. Don't give up.
So I think that we just have one last question.
What is your cult confession?
Oh, when I was, I must have been like 13, 14, 15. I found a little transistor radio, just a little one. And back then we had Walkmans. Yeah, so it was a Walkman, had the little like wire headphones, really cheap pair, right? And it would play cassette tapes, but it also had a radio on it. And we, in our home, we never listened to any radio. There was not even talk radio did we listen to, because even on some talk radio shows, there would be little segments or commercials with music in them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't approve of any outside music. So my cult confession is that I snuck my Walkman in as a teenager with my heart pounding, blood just like thumping in my head. I knew I was going to get caught, which, side note, I did not get caught. But like I had overwhelming guilty conscience. And I remember vividly going into my closet and sneaking, like shutting the door behind me and listening to jazz music.
Jazz, it was all for jazz. Stop.
And I was going to go to hell, but again, kind of like I was saying, even looking back and in those moments, I would question, like, how can this be so wrong? Like, This is beautiful music. I'm listening to beautiful, fun, energetic music that is not talking about Satan. It's not evil. Nobody's drinking anybody's blood. Like, I think of like all these terrible things that it's portrayed to be. It's portrayed to be sexual and satanic and all of these awful, like, you must stay away from this. And I remember in that moment listening, and it's silly, right? It's so silly and it's funny, but it's psychologically what was going through my brain is just questioning, like, why is this wrong?
Music is such a beautiful thing, you know, like we use it in the church too, but like the fact that you had to feel shame and guilt about enjoying music, it's
Jazz of
just
all
crazy.
things.
Yeah. Really sad.
It's just sad, yeah. It's a lot of extra anxiety and stuff that we add onto kids and
Yep.
people and women that we don't need to. You know, it's
like,
life is already hard as it is. We don't
Right.
need extra.
It's not just an unattainable expectation. It's an expectation that withholds so many good and positive things. Like it's detrimental. Like
Yeah.
it's like like you said, it's like having food but then not giving it to your kid. You know,
Yeah.
like we have access to all of these good and beautiful things, but you're saying it's wrong. You're saying it's separating me from God. Like again, that spiritual abuse. It's not just withholding something beautiful from them, it's telling them that they're inherently wrong because they are attracted to it, because they are drawn to it, because they are curious. Most of the time it's just curiosity, a lot of curiosity at that age, you know, where that curiosity should be cultivated and given in us. That's what home is for, is so that you can experience these things in a safe environment. Instead, our environment was not safe and we weren't allowed to experience these things, and it was because God didn't want us to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot to work through. It's a lot to
untie
yourself from. Yeah. So I listen to a lot of music these days.
Good.
I'm a big fan.
I do
too. Good.
Yes.
Well, I think that probably wraps it up for today. Thank you again, Lisa, so much for taking this time and for sharing those really, really hard stories with us. I know that, like, just for me, that it helps hearing like that other perspective, because I saw one side of things with your mom and there was this whole other situation going on that I never knew about. So I know that this will, I'm hopeful that this will touch a lot of people. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for watching this video. Please like and subscribe and send us an email if you'd like to share your story. We appreciate all of the support.
Yes.
And thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Share your story.
If you have been affected by religious trauma or abuse, we want to hear your story.
Even if you're not ready to share publicly, we would be happy to listen and support you on your journey, free of judgment or pressure.
Please email us at cultconfessionskjv@gmail.com to get started.
We believe you.